Good morning, everyone, and thank you to Payments Canada and Tracy for giving me the opportunity to speak to you today. Those of us that have been working on instant payments know what an exciting times they are. They're really amazing. There's a lot of transformation that is happening in instant payments, real-time payments, and the industry has made a lot of progress recently in terms of advancing this globally. I'm also grateful to share these thoughts today ahead of the Federal Reserve's own key milestone, which is the launch of the FedNow Service, which is our first payment rail, new payment rail in close to 50 years, and one that I believe will expand and propel instant payments in the US. So what I wanted to do today is to provide you with a brief update on the FedNow Service and where we are on that journey. And also I wanted to provide you with a couple of ideas in terms of what's been some of the decisions that we had to undertake early on as we build the FedNow Service, things such as industry readiness, the settlement model, and also how can we support accessibility for the system and some of the technology choices that we made, and also give you some of the lessons learned drawing from those decisions. And then also I wanted to offer a look of some of the challenges, some choices that we have ahead of us, we as in FedNow, but also we as the entire industry as we work on payments. But first, let me just take a quick step back and remind ourselves why this journey is so important. A couple years ago, after the COVID pandemic disrupted life across the world, one of my Fed colleagues, Loretta Mester, president of the Federal Reserve Bank of Cleveland, gave a speech laying out the clear stakes of our work, the clear stakes to develop better and faster and more real-time payment systems. She said, "The payment system is a crucial part of the infrastructure of the US. And a well-functioning and secure payment system is vital for a sound economy." It really is that simple. The work that we're doing with FedNow, the work that Payments Canada is doing, are vital for sound economic national economies, just as they're vital for global economies that we all participate in. But this work towards instant payments can be extremely challenging. Much of the time, this work is meaningful, even sometimes fun, but as other times it can be complex and even exhausting. Those of you that know me know that I love hiking. And as I think about our journey towards instant payments, I create an analogy with going up the mountain on a very, very windy road with many decisions that need to be made along the way. Veteran hikers, and with Canada being such an incredible place for a hiking destination, I'm sure that quite a few of you in this audience, veteran hikers know that in order to have a good hike, there is a lot of planning and a lot of decisions that need to be made at the very beginning, but also along the way, decisions that get compounded on top of each other and really determine whether or not when you get to the top, whether or not you get to the top, first of all, and also the type of, how do you get to the top as a party. So as we prepare to launch FedNow in July, I'll share with you where we are on that journey, where we are on that hike, also some of those decisions, again, that we had to make early on, and then talk also about the future, some of the decisions that are still ahead of us. But before I go any further, let me remind you, and I have to say this, that my thoughts here today are my own and do not necessarily reflect the views of the Federal Reserve System. So for the past few years, we've been building FedNow from the ground up in close collaboration with the industry. We certainly have been doing a lot of testing with early participants and also with the early adopters. And where we are today is that our teams with 2 months to go are very much busy in terms of finalizing some of the testing and also doing the certification of those early adopters. Our pre-launch program has a highly diverse mix of institutions, large banks, small banks, medium-sized banks, service providers, and also technology providers. Many of them have been testing with us along the way. So very early on, as we were developing the FedNow service, we started exposing that code in our testing environment to a select group of participants, and then in September, to a larger number of pilot participants. When we released that code in September, we were, I would say, approximately 80% done. So we gave the pilot participants really early access to our service in order to help them understand how their code works, how our code works, and just increase the level of readiness for the go live. In April, we have started our certification phase. We started, in fact, on April 1st, and by the end of the day, we had the very first organization certified. So there's a lot of momentum and readiness that is going into the July date, and we are on track for the launch. But as excited as we are for the launch in July, I am personally a lot more excited about what's to follow July. I think there is a lot of opportunity. There are a lot of features and functionality that we're going to continue to develop as part of the FedNow service in order to support the innovation that will happen in instant payments in the US. And to get to this point, we have made, as you can imagine, dozens of really important decisions and probably thousands of micro decisions in building the FedNow service. I would only speak to 3 of them. And if you ask many of my colleagues which are the top 3 decisions, they will probably come with different lists. But maybe one thing that all the lists are going to have in common is industry readiness and our industry readiness strategy. And I think everybody at this conference is fully aware that payments rails are only as effective as their reach and their use. We knew that FedNow strategy would need to include more than simply building a high-quality instant payments and hoping people will use it, meaning that we had 2 challenges ahead of us when we started off on this hike. We certainly had to build FedNow as a service, but we also needed to help the industry get ready for FedNow. As many of you know, the US has a very complex banking system with over 9,000 institutions of various sizes and different business models. So this was no easy feat. The level of understanding of instant payments and readiness for instant payments across those 9,000 institutions varied and still varies greatly. So what we did is to create a special team to work together with our product team, with our sales and marketing team, to support and increase the readiness of US financial institutions to adopt instant payments and to streamline and digitize onboarding. And here's an important lesson that we learned in this space. We knew that engaging with the industry would be valuable, but engaging with the industry early and often throughout the entire process has proven absolutely priceless. And really from 2 perspectives. One, helping us in terms of define what the FedNow product will look like, and then also helping us help the industry in terms of how we can increase their readiness for FedNow. Early on, we embarked on a listening tour to better understand the needs and wants of the industry. We also pulled together what we call a FedNow community to pull together stakeholders across the entire industry to help them work with each other as well as to help us as we were developing the service. I talked about the pilot program. We put that pilot program in place very early on, years before we needed to leverage the pilots as to test the technology. We first enabled the pilot as an advisory body to advise us in terms of the features and functionality for FedNow. So all of this has helped us immensely to define what FedNow looked like from day one. It certainly provided us with a lot of feedback and also gave us an opportunity to customize our program in terms of ensuring that we put good information out for the industry to leverage in terms of getting ready for FedNow, understanding some of the pain points that they might have and how we can mitigate. We release different tools to help with that, like FedNow Explorer and also the FedNow Service Provider Showcase to just help the industry find information easier and get them more prepared for FedNow. Now, of course, industry readiness strategies don't end once we go live. This is something that we're going to continue to do. This has become, I would say, part of our DNA in terms of soliciting extensive input as we're doing development and as we're releasing new features and functionality. I would say, in a way, that we co-created FedNow with the industry, and we intend to continue to do so. The second key decision that I'll highlight was the choice of the FedNow settlement model. And there are, of course, a whole lot of arrays of ways to settle instant payments. There's the deferred net settlement, the special accounts with separate funds dedicated to instant payments. And because FedNow followed in the footsteps of other central banks, we're able to learn some lessons about what works well under those various models. The level of complexity that I mentioned before about in the US banking system translated into a need for us to have a settlement model that could be accessible to all US financial institutions, regardless of where they sit in that ecosystem. And ultimately, we chose a model that settles straight through existing Fed accounts. These are the same accounts that FedWire Funds and FedACH use to settle payments. And that added a level of simplicity when it came to instant payment settlement in the US. For example, using existing Fed accounts effectively sidestepped the need for banks to create special accounts for FedNow, which ultimately removed adoptions barriers to adoption and made liquidity management significantly easier for those involved. So one key takeaway from this one is the wisdom that we're able to tap into by talking to other central banks, including ECB, European Central Bank, Bank of England, Bank of Canada, and the Reserve Bank of Australia. And some of these conversations go years back, and they allow us to really see the value in using a simple settlement model in the context of the US's very complex and highly diverse financial system. The third decision worth highlighting is what I'll call accessibility, or rather, how to support a broad accessibility under our existing framework. And here I'm going to talk about the number, and I've talked about it before in terms of the number and diversity of financial institutions. But in addition, the FedNow service is only accessible through banks that have a master account with the Federal Reserve or can have access to a master account with the Federal Reserve. But I also mentioned that there's a broad ecosystem of service providers and fintechs who innovate and offer products and services through established relationships with the banks. What this all means is that the Fed had to adopt a more nuanced approach to engaging with the industry by developing a strategy that reaches and includes non-banks. In other words, to intentionally consult the entire payment ecosystem. And this was new for us, and this is something that we had to focus on. We also had to make design decisions to support broader accessibility by thousands of institutions of all sizes, connecting in different ways and leveraging different technologies or service providers. So an observation here as it relates to accessibility, especially when it comes to instant payments, there is a need to maximize engagement across the entire ecosystem and build a lot of flexibility into the system. Flexibility means building a platform that is use case agnostic. We certainly have done that with FedNow, and staying mindful of the different ways that organizations connect, not just directly, but also indirectly, to make sure that we have and we provide equal access and choice to smaller institutions like community banks and credit unions, which are a critical feature of the US economy. As I mentioned, there were dozens of other decisions. I won't have time to get into some of those. There are some interesting ones, like, for example, how we stood up the FedNow organization to operate like a startup within the Federal Reserve, some of the choices that we made in terms of building the system from the ground up, and making sure that, that we leverage cloud-based technologies, but maybe those are stories for another time. Now, having laid out those 3 sets of decisions and lessons, I'm going to spend a few minutes in terms of looking ahead at some of the choices that we have ahead of us. And interestingly enough, some of the choices already came up in the conversations that happened, in the keynotes that happened before me. One of them is fraud. So all the challenges that we see in front of us, I'm sure we all agree that fraud is the biggest, and that's probably not even close. Now, fraud is not new. Fraud is probably as old as history itself. We all know that bad actors are going to look for new ways of making money, and that will go with the new payment rail. But I think we also have an opportunity ahead of us as instant payment operators to look to see how we can support the banks and support corporates and individual consumers manage their fraud risk. And this is an area where we as instant payment operators have traditionally shied away from, but I think this is an area where we certainly need to lean into. The responsibility of managing fraud remains with the banks. That is still the first line of defense, but I think there's a lot that we can do with new technologies, with access to new data, in terms of supporting the broader ecosystem manage fraud more effectively. A second challenge that lies ahead is the work of future-proofing our payment system. I think COVID reminding us yet again that we don't know what's going to happen a couple years ahead. So certainly we don't know what's going to happen decades ahead of us. So what that means is that we need to future-proof our roadmaps. We need to future-proof our instant payment systems by sharing best practices, by making sure that we can support frequent releases, by making sure that we don't allow technology debt to build up to the point that it crowds out any other type of innovation. Another rich opportunity to future-proof is also right in front of us, and that is the continuous global move towards ISO 20022 messaging standards. I think we've been making a lot of progress in that space, and that progress needs to continue, and it will position all of us very well to respond with agility as the payments landscape evolves. The last challenge that I'll touch on is the growing interest in adding cross-border capabilities to instant payments. And to be clear here, the Federal Reserve has not made a decision or announced any plans to add cross-border features to FedNow or add any such feature to existing Fed payments rail. However, we are very aware that these conversations are certainly happening in the industry. So if you can send funds between Boston and San Francisco, why can't you send funds between Boston and Toronto or Rome, for example? But there's a lot of complexity that comes also, a lot of pain points that come with cross-border payments, things that we need to solve for, like legal and policy and operational implications. But at the same time, I know many of us here would like to see the industry globally make quick progress addressing those challenges. So in summary, I just shared three key decisions on our FedNow journey, and I could share many more if we had some additional time. Feel free to find me later on. I also discussed some key choices that still lie ahead for us. But before I conclude, I want to emphasize my biggest lesson from the last several years, which is a reminder to all of us to harness the remarkable collaboration that takes place across our organizations and payment platforms. I think this conference, this summit, is a great opportunity to do exactly that. I will go as far as saying that the payments industry is one of the most collaborative and sharing-oriented industry, and maybe that's why payments people make such great hiking partners. Thank you, everyone, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your conference.